Welcome. Gonna read you one of my books, Visible and Invisible by Jenni DeWitt. Sleep beckoned to Eva like delicate tendrils of smoke. She tumbled backward into exhaustion, giving in to its temptation. Fear stabbed her as she saw people running over the hill toward her with terrified expressions and flailing arms. Something was wrong. She moved toward the center of the house, calling to her friends to take cover. She crouched down and waited, but no one responded. They were running out of time. She sprinted from the bedroom to the living room, whipping her head around as she searched for her friends. The large windows were a magnet pulling her gaze. A huge, horrible mountain of water was rushing toward the house. The people outside were running in a hopeless attempt to escape it. As the water barreled down on the house, Eva threw her arms over her head and braced for impact. When it hit, the windows would shatter. The few people who survived were running toward her house, which remained untouched. Eva sprinted to the door and flung it open to let the people inside. She saw the reason they were still running. 3 horrible, pure black tornadoes, devoid of any light, twisted and turned in a path straight toward them. Eva screamed, or at least she tried to. Leaving the door open, she tripped over furniture, banging her knees as she shouted for her friends again. Where were they? She spotted them in Jayloon's car outside. They were laughing and smiling as if they were clueless to what was going on around them. Eva bolted out the door and ran toward them. We have to get inside. The tornadoes are coming. They gave her blank stares. Her long brown hair whipped in the violent wind, creating a storm of its own as she ran closer, fighting the wind to get to them. Eva woke up, gasping for air. Her gray t-shirt clung to her back, drenched in sweat. She shoved the damp tendrils of hair away from her face and peered around, frustration pulling at the corners of her consciousness and hands trembling. She resisted the urge to nibble her one remaining long fingernail. Her battered math notebook caught her attention where it teetered on the edge of her bed. She scooped it up and squinted through tired eyes at the sloppy handwriting. The last problem was half done. Great. Now she was falling asleep mid-math problem. She tossed her homework on the floor with a thud. No way was she finishing it tonight. She'd have to do it in the morning. Eva pulled her purple quilt, a relic from her 5th birthday, up to her chin, the way she had when she was little. When Graham gave the quilt to her, she said, I made it with love. In her little kid mind, she had imagined Graham's love was literally woven into the blanket. She used to wrap it around her and pretend it was Graham, giving her a hug every night when she went to bed. A movement on Eva's left distracted her from the memory. She turned to see her dog Flip, resting his head on the edge of the bed. Flip's gaze seemed to ask, You okay? His shiny brown eyes were genuine, but his hair stuck up in such a ridiculous way she couldn't help but smile. She stuck her hand out of the cover to rub his soft fur. Outside, she could hear the wind rushing over the Nebraska plains as it hit the outside of her small yellow house. It blew past, reminding her of the group of people in her dream, off to places unknown. The tornado still haunted Eva, but she needed to get some sleep. Eva forced herself to focus on the trees outside her window, standing solid and reliable in her front yard. Pretty soon they burst into red flames, leaves glowing bright as a Nebraska sunset. In her town, too small to be a map dot, the trees were a local attraction. People would ride by on their bikes and stop to take pictures. She imagined her tire swing hanging from a long rope in the tree where her grandpa tied it as a surprise for her 10th birthday. She heard it blowing in the wind, as if carrying an invisible passenger. Her eyelids were heavy. Then she was running through a cornfield. The sharp leaves on the corn stalks cut at her bare legs. Her breath came fast as she tried to keep up with the people running beside her. Eva glanced over and saw Grace O'Donnell, her classmate since kindergarten, red hair streaming behind her like a warning flag and bright blue eyes flashing with fear. To Eva's left, her classmate Alex was running beside her. Even amid his terror, he ran with the grace of an athlete, his biceps strained against his t-shirt as he pumped his arms. Eva dared to glance over her shoulder, trying to figure out why they were running. 3 pure black tornadoes ripped toward them as if they might cut the night sky open and pour out their unspeakable darkness. Her heart pounded in her chest as she willed her clumsy legs to move faster. After an eternity, they reached the edge of town and ran to the closest building, the church. Alex jerked on the ancient wood door and it sprang open. They all shoved inside, and the slamming door blocked her view of the tornadoes. They turned in unison, and Eva saw familiar faces staring back at her from the pews as time stood still for 2 clicks of the clock. Then Grace shouted, They're coming! The tornadoes are coming! We have to take shelter! Eva, Alex, and Grace bolted for cover, but the people in the pews sat staring, their confusion morphing into annoyance. Then they turned their backs, dismissing Eva's group without words. She bolted from her hiding spot and ran to the front of the church, desperate to get their attention. The pastor strode toward her as if he intended to stop this nonsense. Long white robes billowing behind him, Eva ran in the opposite direction, searching for shelter. Country music blared over the church speakers, and Eva opened her eyes. After a moment of confusion, she realized she was in her own bedroom, not a church. Eva pushed the snooze button on her phone alarm to silence the music and lay back, a sense of dread rising in her like a bottle filling with water. 2 nightmares in one night. That was a first. It was getting worse. Much worse. Okay, so what do you think so far? She lives in Nebraska. She's having creepy dreams. She doesn't like math. She's tired. She doesn't want to go to school, but she has to. Next section. So we got to a twirly. We're not through a chapter. The weight of the dreams pinned Eva to her bed, but she needed to get up for school. She sucked in extra air and let it out in a rush, trying to calm herself. She had to get it together. Mom might be home from work. Hopefully she wasn't in one of her bad moods again. Eva remembered the days when her mom used to stroke her hair and tell her everything would be okay. Those days were gone. No more comforting ice cream for breakfast, unless she got it for herself. Eva shook her head. She didn't need anyone to get her ice cream. She was 17 and perfectly capable of taking care of herself. She got out of bed with one eye squinting and the other closed. She didn't need the lights on. After a decade in the same house, she had every nook and cranny memorized. Eva wiggled into her favorite faded jeans and pulled on a teal shirt that matched the color of her eyes. She splashed cold water on her face and dabbed it with a towel, then grabbed her mom's mascara and made a few quick strokes. Finally, she was returning to the land of the living. As she walked to school, Eva stole a few extra minutes to read. She lifted her feet out of habit at the spots in the sidewalk where the tree roots had shoved the cement up into tiny mountain ranges. As she got to the school, Jay-Loon fell in beside her. Eva snapped her book shut and shoved it into her book bag. "How about that horrible math assignment? Did you figure it out?" Jay-Loon asked. "Barely. It's a great way to fight insomnia, though." True. Jay-Loon's laugh was a melody floating in the air. "What are you wearing?" Eva was no fashion queen, but even she couldn't miss Jay-Loon's overalls, straw hat, and pink cowboy boots. "It's Spirit Week. My ancestors were a bunch of hicks, and I'm representing that fine lineage. I was going to chew on some straw for effect, but I kept sneezing." Eva groaned and smacked her head. They were supposed to dress up as their ancestors. She didn't give two hoots about some stupid Spirit Week, but Jay-Loon always got into it. She had a pang of guilt. Maybe she should try harder. Then again, her ancestors were a bunch of cow-milking, squirrel-eating farmers who spent their life trying not to freeze to death in the cold Nebraska winters. A life of survival. Eva glanced down at her clothes and shrugged. Good enough. After all, wasn't she trying to survive her last year of high school? When they reached the old brick school, Eva pulled the heavy front door open. They stepped inside as Grace strode by in traditional Irish dress. The memory of her dream slammed into Eva, catching her off guard. She took a deep breath. "Get it together, Eva." The day was a tired monster slogging by. As Eva waited in line for her tray of meatloaf surprise, she scanned the room for a place to sit, where she could blend in without being too awkward. Nothing had changed in the lunchroom for decades, not even the lunch lady. The tables had wheels and folded in half. Their light brown tops were tired and worn from generations of lunch trays and soapy rags. Finally, Eva made it to the front of the line. The lunch lady greeted her with the same scowl she probably gave Eva's mom 20 years ago. Maybe she's some sort of eternal mutant alien. Mutant lunch lady. That could be a good book. Eva sat at the end of the speech team table and heard them talking about Alex and Janet. They'd broken up. Again. Surprise, surprise. The story got less and less interesting every time. Janet got jealous of Alex. Alex got annoyed with her. It was mind-numbing. Since no one ends up with their high school sweetheart anyhow, what's the point? Eva let her hair fall forward, blocking out the world as her mind drifted. The dreams were happening every night, like a cartoon storm cloud following her around. She was losing hope they would ever stop. Somehow, each night was more terrifying than the one before. Maybe she should research tornadoes. If she understood the dreams, they might stop. At least it was something to try. The thought of it made her feel less helpless. The bell blared and Eva jumped, bumping into the girl next to her. "Jeez," the girl shouted. "Sorry," Eva said, as she bolted to go dump her tray. The school was built in 1910 and had about 1,000,000 floors. She had to climb 3 of them to get to class on time. As the late bell rang, she slid into the seat Jay-Loon saved for her. Eva sighed. She might be sweaty from climbing Mount Marysburg High, but she was on time. Alex slid into the seat next to her with a smirk. There were no assigned seats, but everyone sat in the same spot every day. Everyone except Alex. Each day he sat in a new spot like he was desperate to keep life interesting. The way people reacted always made Eva smile. They'd come in and see their normal spot taken. They'd spin in a complete circle and end up sitting in a broken desk in the back, even though there were plenty of other options. The teacher interrupted Eva's thoughts. "Open your books. You're going to do your assignment with a partner today. Let's count off." Eva stifled a groan, wondering who she'd get stuck with this time. Mrs. Buckle moved around the classroom, her arm serving as a grim reaper while she dictated the pairs. When Eva realized Grace was her partner, she relaxed a little. It could have been worse. Grace was a cheerleader, but she'd always been nice to Eva. She remembered Grace walking up to the school every day with a drove of brothers and sisters trailing behind her. It always made Eva wonder how it would feel to have siblings. She'd probably never know. "Hey, Eva," Grace said, flashing her pretty smile as she sat down. "Hi," Eva said, her voice coming out as a squeak. "Do you understand this?" Grace asked. "It's insanely confusing." "Yeah, it's hard, but I think I'm getting it." It surprised Eva what a good team she and Grace made. When one of them didn't understand a problem, the other did. 10 minutes left, Mrs. Buckle announced. Ask questions if you have them. The football players at the next table smirked at Grace. Hey, Grace, I got a question. What you doing Friday night? Grace rolled her eyes and turned her back on them. Eva smiled. No one ignored the football players. They were gods in their small town. You'd think they went off to war, not some stupid football game every Friday night, the way everyone worshipped them. They weren't gods, though. Eva shivered, remembering 8th grade when they spent the entire year barking at her every time they walked past. They'd found her mom's senior picture in one of those giant dusty pages of class pictures hanging in the hall. Your mom was a smoking hot babe. What's wrong with you? Your dad must have been a dog. She'd faked more stomach aches that year than she had her whole life. Eva realized she was facing off and snuck a glance at Grace. She knew she should offer some polite chit-chat. It was the Nebraska way. Why couldn't she ever think of anything normal to say? Come on, Eva, it's not that hard. People do it all the time. She was grateful when Grace filled the silence between them. Have anything fun planned for the weekend? No, how about you? People love talking about themselves. She figured out a few years ago if you could get them talking about themselves, it was easier to keep the conversation going. I think I might go to the lake with some people tomorrow. I'm supposed to get Arctic next week. This might be our last chance. That sounds fun, Eva said, trying to sound convincing. A part of her wondered what it was like to be popular. Go to cool parties and hang out with guys. But it was such a tiny part of her. The bell rang, and the class bolted out of their seats, headed for their next destination. When the last bell rang, Eva shoved her way through the crowded hall to her locker, grabbed her heavy book bag, and raced out of the school like a prisoner on jailbreak. She was trying not to be late again for her shift at the nursing home. As she walked, the gentle breeze brushed Eva's face and carried with it the smell of change. She held her arms out at her sides as she walked through the falling leaves. She loved fall. Nature's dramatic flare before it gave up the ghost and succumbed to winter. A leaf began its final descent in front of her, and she paused, tilting her face upward to enjoy the show. She had the sense she was being watched and turned to see Alex, football helmet in hand, staring at her from half a block away. Eva blushed and spun around, hurrying her steps toward home. That's chapter 1.